afternoon, everyone. Let me start out by saying that we, together, humanity, are on the threshold of a new age. The population is aging at such a rapid rate that we as a species have never experienced this before. While we see this as a great challenge across developing and developed nations, if we think about this in the right way, we should see this as a great opportunity so that the lives of the next generation of older people can be so much better than the lives of today's older people or the lives of older people in my grandparents' generation. What I'm going to talk about over the next several minutes are some of the changes that accompany getting old and how we need to rethink the environments in which older people need to relate and interact in order to experience the best possible well-being. The environment should be an enabler of happiness. It should be an enabler of wellness and health. It shouldn't be a barrier. But right now, in societies in Thailand, as well as my country of Canada, and across the world, too many environments in which older people live serve as barriers to well-being, serve as obstacles to happiness and good health. Let's talk about how we together can change that for the next generation of older people. As I said, the population around the globe is aging at an unprecedented rate, and here in Thailand is a perfect example of this. Irrespective of what fertility rates might be over the next several decades, the bottom line is pretty clear. Thailand is an aging population and will continue to be so. And with that will come the disorders, the disabilities, the medical conditions that attend to an aging population. Of the many healthcare concerns that are associated with the aging of the global population, perhaps that condition which is causing the most concern among healthcare planners, perhaps here in Asia, most certainly in the West, are the rising numbers of older people affected with dementia or a loss of intellectual or cognitive abilities. The most common cause of this is Alzheimer's disease. The second most common cause is cerebrovascular disease or stroke, or some combination of Alzheimer's and stroke. For my generation, the baby boomers, those of us born between 1946 and 1964, disorders like Alzheimer's will be, for our generation, what cancer and heart disease was for our parents and our grandparents, the #1 health concern. Thailand will not be immune to this. And so as we think about what we need to do to enable health and wellness and well-being, we must make sure that for an aging population such as that which is occurring in Thailand, that we provide adequate supports and care for people suffering from these kinds of disorders. This has to be a major public health concern for this nation as well as all nations around the globe. The aging of the global population will also have other profound consequences of how we think about the best ways to deliver health care. Right now, by and large, in most societies, when we think about providing health care to older people, we are too exclusively, too heavily focused on intervening in an acute and episodic fashion. You get access to a doctor or a nurse when you're sick. This is how healthcare is largely structured around the world today. But with the aging of the population, that will not do. The fundamental requirement is for us to keep older people healthy, not just intervene when they're sick. And so we must move from an acute, episodic approach to treating illness to one of health management and wellness and prevention. Another trend that will affect Thailand, as it is the rest of the world, is that we must move the center for where healthcare is delivered from the hospital out into the community. We cannot expect so many older people around the globe to have to come to the hospital for healthcare. that is too expensive, it's unsustainable, it's not even fair to those older people and their older children who have to take them to the doctor. We must bring health care to the community, out to where people live, not ask them to come to us. Right now, by and large, across developed nations and in some pockets of developing nations, healthcare is quite fragmented. And that is really a problem for older people, because older people will have health conditions that affect a variety of different parts of the body. But right now, you go to one doctor for your eyes, you go to another doctor for your heart, you go to another doctor for your joints, and perhaps you go to another doctor for other things. And none of these doctors talk with one another. And they duplicate each other's efforts. And this is very wasteful, it's very time-consuming, and it causes distress to older people and their families. So that's today. Tomorrow, health care for an aging global population is going to be highly coordinated. There will be a health manager who understands all of your different health care needs, as well as the other determinants of health and well-being. And finally, as I said a moment ago, perhaps one of the most critical shifts that's going to take place as the population ages is to move from a focus on treating disease and functional disability to a new system where we focus on promoting wellness and functional capacity. Can you all hear me okay with this mic? Okay, good. So, what are the implications then for Thailand's healthcare strategy? Well, for one, when we think about the well-being or the social determinants of health for older people, we need to understand that health and wellness is dependent on a number of different social determinants, not just the quality of healthcare delivery, whether it's in the hospital or in the community. For one, for older people to have an enriched and happy life, they must have access to affordable housing. They also must have access to ongoing socialization. They must feel like they are connected to older people and to their community. Of course, they must stay connected to their families. Older people must have access to affordable and safe transportation that recognizes the unique needs of growing old and how demanding it can be to try to travel from one part of a community to another. And that's why you're seeing the movement across the world of senior-friendly communities. In addition, it's critically important that older people have financial security. Nations that don't attend to the financial needs of older people will not be successful in enabling well-being, no matter how sophisticated their residential care or their hospitals or their medical systems are. Now, when we first started to think about how to ensure the best quality of life for older people, particularly those that were living with other older people in what we call congregate residential settings, retirement homes, nursing homes, what we call in the West assisted living, where older people come to live together, including independent senior living in apartment complexes where all the neighbors are older people. We started to approach how to do this well through a movement called the Culture Change Movement. And this demanded that we had to respect that each individual older person needs to be treated as an individual, that one size does not fit all. That there has to be very strong relationships that are established between older people that are being cared for, in this context, the residents of senior living facilities, their family members, the staff who care for them, and other members of the community. We heard from a prior speaker that as important as it is to design really healthy environments for older people to live in, the people factor is critically important. And so we must ensure that the people who we charge with the responsibility of caring for older people are well trained, that they're thoughtful, empathic people, and they continue to improve their skills over time. The resident is the chief. The resident, the older person, is in charge of their health care, is in charge of their daily activities, is in charge of the environment in which we live. They tell us what they need, and then we provide it to them. As opposed to today's approach where we tell the older person, you're going to live here, you're going to get your meal served at this time, this is when a person's going to come to your home to take care of you. That's how we're doing it today. That's not how we're going to do it tomorrow. When I'm an older person and that day is rapidly approaching, even if I need the help of another person, I want to decide who that other person is. I want to decide when they knock on my door to come help me. I want to decide what time I take my bath or shower. I want to decide what time I eat my meal and at what kind of meal I eat. I don't want other people deciding that for me. I want to have the same degree of autonomy as an old person that I have today as a middle-aged person. Does that sound reasonable to you? It does? But in so many places around the world, that very simple principle is not respected. And we tell older people what's best for them, instead of them telling us what they want and then us giving it to them. Okay? Whatever we decide to build here in Thailand together, that's the first principle we must embrace. It's all about them. It's all about the older person and their family. It's not about us. If you agree with what I just said, let me hear by your applause. Now, what are some of the innovations that were introduced to try to respect these principles? Well, if we're going to care for older people in a congregate setting, meaning where several older people will live together and be cared for by a team of people, that environment needs to be like a home, not an institution. I don't want to live in an institution or a hospital, and if I don't want to live in an institution or a hospital, why should anybody have to? So these settings that we will create here in Thailand and what we've created elsewhere will feel like someone's home, because it will be someone's home. It won't be an institution. We know that older people, like younger people, like so many of you, derive great benefit from ambient sounds that are attuned to nature. And we just heard a very thoughtful talk about that connection to nature being so important for well-being. We know that pleasant music also calms older people that are upset. We know that older people, just like us, need access to the outdoors. They need access to green space. We know that the programming, the activities that we provide to older people can include access to children, access to small animals. We have found through research that this enables the well-being of older people. And as I said a moment ago, older people, just like us, want to have choice, whether it's what they eat or what their daily schedule is like. Along with these innovations, what we've learned is that staff members have to have flexible roles and responsibilities. A staff member within a congregate care setting needs to be comfortable taking on whatever task in the moment has to be taken on. A phrase like, "That's not in my job description," doesn't work in settings that provide high-quality care to older people. The welfare, the well-being, the happiness, the safety of an older person is everybody's responsibility who works there, irrespective of what their specific job title is or their training. Does that make sense to you? Okay, all right. And of course, we can't treat older people like we are going to put them away in some environment disconnected from their communities and disconnected from their families. We want them to still feel a sense of connection to community and to family. And that has to be a very important part of the experience that we offer. Okay. Now I'm going to talk about the environment and how the environment has to respect the very special needs of all of us as we change with time, as we grow older. Many have called this environmental competence, and the principle is quite simple. There has to be a balance between the demands of an environment and the physical, mental, and emotional capabilities of those living in the environment, in this case, the older person, in order for the older person to adapt to the environment successfully. The environment should provide choice and variety so that older adults can select the settings or services that appropriately conform the environment to their needs. Now, I'm going to get into some specifics about this in the next minute or two. There are some critical design principles as we think about environments to care for older people. One I mentioned before, connectivity, connection to the greater community. In too many venues across North America and elsewhere, we segregate the elderly. We put them in boxes that we call nursing homes or institutions, and they are completely cut off or disconnected from the rest of their community. Why do we do that? There's no good reason. Older people, just like us, have to feel a sense of belonging and community. The settings that we design to care for older people shouldn't be institutional. They should feel like places where you can nest, where you can live comfortably, without there being too much tumult, too much activity. The neighborhoods that we create within these congregate care settings should feel residential. They should feel like neighborhoods. We want to encourage walking for mobility and for good cardiovascular health. So the walking distances need to be short enough so that people aren't afraid to leave their homes and start to walk. Because many older people get tired very easily. And if the distances that we create in these communities are too long, they will be afraid to go out and walk, right? So we have to have walking distances that respect their limitations. And the lighting should be natural. Now, there are a series of biological consequences that accompany aging. And we take some of these things for granted. There are sensory deficits. We know that as we age, our eyes, our ears, our sensation, feeling pain, feeling temperature, that starts to decline as part of the normal consequence of aging. We know that there are cognitive changes, both as a part of normal aging and then as a result of conditions like Alzheimer's disease. We know that as we get older, our gait and our balance are not as strong, and so we're more prone to trip or to stumble or to fall and be injured. And we also know that as we get older, our heart and lungs are not as strong, so we tire more easily. As we design environments and programs within those environments for older people, we need to respect and adapt to these changes so that the older person can be fulfilled and not be afraid to stay active. Now, for sensory deficits, I'm going to give you some examples of how designers and architects plan environments to address these things. So, because of changes in our vision as we get older, we want environments that have reduced glare. We want enhanced light levels. We want to choose colors that are easier for older people to discriminate. We want to provide cues that are not just visual, but are tactile, meaning we can feel the cues when we touch a piece of furniture or a handrail. And we want to also provide what are called olfactory cues, so that when someone sits down to a meal, the ventilation system is such that they can really smell the food that they're going to eat, because that ability does start to deteriorate a bit as we get older. So how we design the handrails, the textured flooring, we use sunshine for warmth, how we encourage cooking and baking fragrances or odors throughout these living situations is very important. We reduce background noise. We reduce echoes. We help sound to transmit more effectively. As I said, we enhance food aromas coming from the kitchen or the dining room. We provide stronger sensations for people's touch abilities in the furniture, in the handrails, in the utensils that they use to eat, and in the flooring. But what about the cognitive changes? As we get older, we do suffer some decline in cognitive changes. So many people my age and older have experienced that they're more forgetful. I am most certainly more forgetful. We also have more trouble navigating, finding our way as we get older. Sometimes we have trouble with our organizational abilities. We're not as planful, we're not as strategic, we're just not as organized in getting our tasks done. If we start to develop serious brain diseases like Alzheimer's, we may have trouble communicating with other people. We can no longer read or write as effectively. We may have difficulty with something called praxis, which is the ability to use objects in the environment, like a knife or a fork, or a brush or a comb, to attend to our daily needs. And we may have difficulties with what's called gnosis, or recognition. When we develop Alzheimer's disease, at some stage in the illness, we sit down to a meal and we cannot tell the difference between a knife and a fork. Or if we go into the bathroom for our bathing, our grooming ritual, we can't recognize what the toothbrush is or how to use it properly. These are some of the very serious things that happen when we develop disorders like Alzheimer's disease. So how, as we design environments for senior living, do we adapt to some of these changes? Well, for one, we do provide what are called multisensory wayfinding cues. They're visual, they're tactile, they're olfactory or smelling, and they're auditory or hearing. We ensure that in apartment buildings or in residential settings that we care for older people, that we have very simple navigational paths, because it's harder for older people to find their way around. There's consistent flooring material. There's what are called familiarity triggers. This is an example in this picture of what's called a memory box. This box is outside of an older person's apartment or their room, and it has personal mementos in it, photos of their family, photos of themselves, which then provides a navigational cue to help them find their room when they're leaving the dining room and wanting to go lie down. Some older people with diseases like Alzheimer's disease get lost very frequently. They get confused, and so we might provide barriers within the environment to make sure that they don't accidentally exit and then get lost in the community. This is an example of one such barrier. This is actually an exit door from a hallway in a building where older people live, but it doesn't look like a door, right? It looks like a bookcase and windows, so that the older person doesn't try to use that as an exit. We make sure that we have secured wandering spaces with seating for when people get tired. We avoid what are called dead ends so that people can freely move around and not get confused at the end of a corridor. We mask the exit, like in this picture. We have automatic on-off timing devices for lamps and appliances, because older people will forget to turn on their light or turn it off. And we'll have delayed closing of automatic doors. There are other things that we do. We make sure that the hallways are widened with handrails. So if an older person gets tired, they can grab the handrail. There's room for wheelchairs or walkers or canes. The chairs and tables in these environments are very carefully selected in terms of their heights, their edges. There has to be adequate lighting, and we make sure that the floor doesn't promote slipping or falling and getting injured. As I said before, we make sure that there are opportunities for people to walk, both inside and outside, but these walking distances are short. We have accessibility supports like rails and spaces for somebody to rest. We strongly encourage physical fitness and aerobic activities. Increasingly, older people want access to pools where they can swim, and then we also put motion centers within their apartments to keep them safe. And I'm going to finish by just talking about meeting their mental health and emotional needs. We know that all people, no matter what the age, derive benefit from being with other people. And so opportunities for socialization is critically important. However, there are times when older people, just like us, desire privacy, and that needs to be provided as well. And we have to give older people the opportunity to grow. Growing old can mean growing. It doesn't only have to mean shrinking. And that's what we desire in these communities, to give people who are growing old every opportunity to grow. Spiritual and religious activities, connectivity to the past and to former friends and family members is all critically important. And I'm going to just finish now by talking about what the goal is for our partnership with MQDC. We believe that Thailand has a great opportunity here, not only to meet the needs of your aging population, but to do so in such a thoughtful, empathic, and innovative way that it can be a lesson not only for all of Southeast Asia, but for many jurisdictions around the world. There's a critical burning platform here. You need to come up with solutions. That will drive you towards innovation. So with MQDC, what we're going to do is encourage collaborative innovation and new senior care delivery models that fit Thailand. It can be informed by the West, but it needs to be made in Thailand. We'll promote healthy physical, cognitive, and emotional aging across your nation through a public awareness campaign. Growing old doesn't have to be seen as a bad thing. It can be seen as a great thing. And we need to destigmatize some of the most frightful elements of people getting older, like getting dementia. We're going to develop partnership models to deliver non-hospital-based coordinated community services that promote cognitive, emotional, and spiritual health. We're going to develop with you seniors community centers that provide health care as well as wellness clinics, social, medical, and dementia day programs, what we call in the West respite care, and family support services. There will be a great need across this country for home care services, and utilizing technology to deliver them in a thoughtful way. And we're going to encourage volunteerism, both middle-aged, retired people to volunteer to care for the elderly, and we're going to encourage and provide incentives for healthy elderly to help care for elderly who are not so healthy. The aging of the Thai population is a shared challenge and opportunity. MQDC's innovations can serve as a model for Thailand and other nations, and it's clear that no one country will come up with all the solutions and innovations to address the aging of the global population. We must work together across international boundaries to share our knowledge and experience, and together we will enhance the well-being of older people across the world. Thank you.